Eleanor Grayson sat on her porch, the creak of her rocking chair a steady rhythm against the hum of cicadas. At 70, she was a fixture in the small town of Willow Creek, her silver hair a crown of wisdom, her eyes sharp with a lifetime of stories. The summer evening draped itself around her like a familiar shawl, warm and heavy, but there was a chill in her bones that had nothing to do with the weather. She'd overheard them, her family, her neighbors, her so-called friends whispering in the church hall after Sunday service. Eleanor's not long for this world, they'd said. Best to start planning now. Planning. The word stung like a slap. They weren't planning a birthday or a reunion. They were planning her funeral. Her funeral. While she still breathed, still laughed, still tended her roses with hands that trembled only slightly. She leaned back, her fingers tightening around the armrests of her chair, and let the weight of their words settle. They thought her frail, a relic to be mourned before her time. But Eleanor Grayson was not done living. She'd always been the strong one. When her husband, Thomas, passed 10 years ago, she'd carried on, turning their modest farmhouse into a haven for stray cats and wayward souls alike. She baked pies for the church, knitted scarves for the children's shelter, and listened to the town's secrets with a kind ear. But now, it seemed, her strength was invisible to those who saw only her age. Her nephew, Daniel, had been the loudest voice in the church hall, his tone clipped and practical. She's got no one else, he'd said. We'll need to settle her estate. Make sure it's fair. Fair. Eleanor's lips twitched into a wry smile. Daniel, with his pressed suits and city ambitions, had never cared for Willow Creek or its simplicity. He'd visited twice a year, always with an eye on her land, her savings, her life. Her sister, Margaret, hadn't been much better, murmuring about preparations with a handkerchief pressed to her lips, as if Eleanor's death were already a tragedy to grieve. And the neighbors so. They'd chimed in too, with their pitying nods and suggestions for hymns. Amazing Grace. Someone had proposed. Eleanor hated that song. She stood, her knees protesting but her resolve firm, and walked inside. The house smelled of lavender and old wood, a scent that grounded her. On the kitchen table sat her leather-bound journal, its pages filled with recipes, memories, and, tucked in the back, a document she'd written years ago, her will. Not the one Daniel thought he'd find, with neat divisions of property and trinkets. No, this was her real will, a testament to her life's true treasures, the ones no one in Willow Creek seemed to see. Eleanor poured herself a cup of chamomile tea, the steam curling like a question mark. She didn't blame them. Not entirely. Age had a way of making people invisible, of turning a woman into a ghost before her heart stopped beating. But she wasn't ready to fade. Not yet. If they wanted to plan her funeral, she'd give them something to talk about. She'd show up, uninvited, with her will in hand and a smile that said, I'm still here. The next morning, Eleanor woke with purpose. She dressed in her favorite emerald green blouse, the one Thomas had said made her eyes shine, and pinned her hair into a neat bun. The mirror showed a woman who'd lived deeply, lines etched by laughter and loss, eyes that held both fire and forgiveness. She tucked her journal under her arm and headed to the town library, where she knew the gossip would be thickest. The library was a hub of whispers, its oak tables crowded with women who called themselves the Willow Creek Historical Society but spent more time trading rumors than preserving history. Eleanor stepped inside, the bell above the door chiming like a challenge. Heads turned, and the air grew heavy with unspoken questions. Eleanor, called Mrs. Harrow, her voice too bright. What brings you here? Oh, just tying up loose ends, Eleanor said, her smile sharp enough to cut through the pretense. She settled at a table, opened her journal, and began to write. Not words, but names every person she'd heard in that church hall. Every voice that had buried her before her time. Daniel. Margaret. Mrs. Harrow. The list grew, each name a spark in her plan. She spent the day moving through town, her presence a quiet rebellion. At the bakery, she bought a dozen cookies and left them for the schoolchildren. Her handwriting bold on the note, from Eleanor Grayson, who's still kicking. At the post office, she mailed letters to old friends, each one a reminder that she wasn't gone yet. And at the church, she slipped into the pews and prayed not for herself, but for those who'd forgotten what it meant to see the living. By evening, the town buzzed with her name. Eleanor's acting strange, they said, writing things down, smiling like she knows something we don't. Good, she thought. Let them wonder. Let them squirm. She wasn't just alive, she was awake. And she had a plan. As night fell, Eleanor sat at her kitchen table, her journal open to a fresh page. She began to write. Not a will this time, but a letter. A letter to Willow Creek, to be read when the time was right. It wasn't about anger or revenge. It was about truth. About the life she'd lived, the love she'd given, and the legacy she'd choose for herself. She wrote until her hand ached, the words flowing like a river she'd held back too long. When she finished, she sealed the letter and tucked it beside her will. Tomorrow, she'd start the next step. She'd visit Daniel, look him in the eye, and ask why he thought her time was up. She'd go to Margaret and remind her that sisters don't bury each other in whispers. And when the town gathered for their so-called planning meeting next week, she'd be there, uninvited, with her real will and a smile that would rewrite their story. Eleanor leaned back, her tea cold but her heart warm. They'd planned her funeral, but she'd plan her comeback. And it would be glorious. The morning sun spilled over Willow Creek, painting the town in hues of gold and promise. Eleanor woke with a fire in her chest, the kind that comes from knowing you've got something to prove. She dressed in a soft lavender dress, her mother's pearl brooch pinned at her collar, and slipped her journal into a woven bag. Today, she'd face Daniel. Her nephew wasn't a villain, not in the storybook sense, but his ambition had blinded him to her vitality. She'd remind him who she was. Daniel lived on the edge of town, in a modern house that looked out of place among Willow Creek's weathered charm. Its glass windows gleamed like his polished shoes, all shine and no soul. Eleanor knocked, her knuckles firm against the door. When he opened it, his face flickered with surprise, then settled into a practiced smile. Aunt Eleanor. What a treat. Come in. She stepped inside, the air cool and sterile, like a museum. I won't stay long, she said, her voice steady. Just wanted to talk. She sat on his leather couch, her bag resting on her lap like a shield. Daniel's eyes darted to it, curious, but he said nothing. He offered her coffee, which she declined, and sat across from her, his hands folded like a man preparing for a negotiation. Daniel, she began, her gaze locking onto his. I heard you at the church, talking about my funeral, my estate. The words hung heavy, and she watched his face pale, his smile faltering. I'm not dead yet. You know. He laughed, a nervous sound. Aunt Eleanor, you've got it all wrong. We were just preparing for when the time comes. It's practical. Practical, she echoed, her tone sharp. Is it practical to count my days while I'm still living them? To divide my land before I've left it? She leaned forward, her eyes burning with a quiet intensity. I raised you, Daniel, when your mother couldn't. I was there. And now you're planning my end like it's a business deal. His mouth opened, then closed, For the first time, he looked small. Not the confident city man who'd breezed into town with big plans. I didn't mean it like that, he said finally. We just thought. You thought I was done. She cut in. But I'm not. And I've got plans of my own. She patted her bag, letting the gesture speak for her. She didn't need to show him the will not yet. Let him wonder what she held. What secrets she'd woven into those pages. She left him there, his protests trailing after her like a child's excuses. The encounter had lit a spark in her, a reminder that her voice still carried weight. Next was Margaret, her sister, who lived in a cottage draped in wisteria. Margaret was softer than Daniel, but her pity was its own kind of blade. Eleanor found her in the garden, clipping roses with a distracted air. Ellie. Margaret's face lit up, but her eyes held that same mournful glint Eleanor had seen in the church. What brings you here? Family, Eleanor said simply, settling on a bench. I heard you, Meg, talking about my funeral. Hymns and all. She kept her tone light, but her words were deliberate, each one a pebble dropped into still water. Margaret's hands froze, the clippers trembling. Oh, Ellie, it wasn't like that. We just want to be ready. You're not as young as you used to be. Neither are you. Eleanor shot back, a smile tugging at her lips. But I don't see anyone planning your send-off. She softened, reaching for Margaret's hand. We're sisters, Meg. We've fought and loved and survived together. Don't bury me before my time. I've got more to give. Margaret's eyes filled with tears, and for a moment, they were girls again, sharing secrets under the stars. I'm sorry, she whispered. I didn't think. I know, Eleanor said, squeezing her hand. But start thinking. Start seeing me. She left Margaret with that, the air between them lighter but still unresolved. There was work to be done, hearts to shift. Over the next few days, Eleanor became a force in Willow Creek. She didn't shout or accuse. She simply lived louder. She volunteered at the community center, teaching a knitting class to teenagers who laughed at her stories. She hosted a potluck at her farmhouse, the tables groaning under the weight of her famous peach cobbler. And everywhere she went, she carried her journal, its presence a quiet promise. The town noticed. Whispers turned from pity to curiosity. What's Eleanor up to? They asked. She's got that look in her eye. At the general store, she overheard Mrs. Harrow telling the clerk. She's writing something. A will. Maybe. Or a memoir. Eleanor just smiled and bought her flower, letting the mystery grow. By the end of the week, the planning meeting loomed. Eleanor knew it was coming. Seen the flyers pinned around town, discreetly worded but clear in their intent. Community discussion, preparing for our elders. It was laughable. Almost. How they cloaked their intentions in kindness. But Eleanor wasn't angry. She was ready. She spent the evening before the meeting at her kitchen table, her letter to Willow Creek nearly complete. She added a few final lines, her pen moving with the certainty of a woman who'd found her voice. The letter wasn't just for the tone, it was for her. A declaration of a life well lived. A life still burning bright. She sealed it, tucked it beside her will, and went to bed with a smile. Tomorrow, she'd walk into that meeting, her head high, her journal in hand. They'd planned her funeral, but she'd planned something better, a reckoning, wrapped in kindness and delivered with a smile. The morning of the community discussion dawned crisp and clear. The kind of day that made Willow Creek feel timeless. Eleanor woke early, her heart steady but her mind racing. Today was the day she'd step into the lion's den, not as prey, but as a force they hadn't reckoned with. She chose a navy dress, simple but elegant, and tied a silk scarf around her neck, Thomas's favorite, a gift from their last anniversary. Her journal, heavy with purpose, went into her bag, along with the sealed letter to Willow Creek. The town hall was a modest building, its whitewashed walls lined with photos of past mayors and faded festival banners. By the time Eleanor arrived, the room was half full, the air thick with hushed voices and the scent of coffee. She paused at the door, taking in the scene, Daniel at the front, flipping through papers, Margaret fidgeting with her handkerchief, Mrs. Harrow whispering to a cluster of neighbors. They hadn't seen her yet, and that was just how she wanted it. She slipped into a chair near the back, her presence unnoticed until Mrs. Harrow's eyes landed on her. The woman's face froze, her whisper cut short. A ripple of glances followed, heads turning like dominoes. Daniel looked up, his expression a mix of confusion and unease. "Aunt Eleanor," he said, his voice carrying across the room. "What are you doing here?" Eleanor smiled, slow and deliberate. "I heard there was a meeting about elders. Figured I'm one of them." A few nervous laughs broke the tension, but the air remained heavy. She settled back, her bag on her lap, and waited. The meeting began with platitudes talk of honoring our seniors and planning for the future. Eleanor listened, her face calm but her mind sharp. They spoke of her as if she were already a memory, their words draped in kindness but edged with finality. Daniel took the lead, outlining practical steps for her care, her estate, her legacy. Margaret nodded along, her eyes darting to Eleanor but never holding her gaze. When the floor opened for comments, Eleanor stood. The room went silent, every eye on her. She moved to the front, her steps measured, her journal in hand. "I've got something to say," she began, her voice clear and strong. "You've all been kind enough to plan my funeral. Hymns, flowers, the works. But there's a problem." She paused, letting the weight of her words settle. "I'm not dead." A murmur ran through the crowd, a mix of shock and shame. Daniel shifted in his seat, his face tight. Eleanor opened her journal, not to read, but to hold it like a talisman. "I've lived in Willow Creek my whole life," she said. "I've loved you, fed you, listened to your troubles. And now you're ready to bury me because I'm old. Because my hands shake sometimes. I'm not done living. And I'm not done giving." She turned to Daniel, her eyes softening but unyielding. "You want my land, my house. You think it's yours to divide. I've got a will. Daniel. A real one. Not the one you're hoping for." She tapped the journal, her smile sharp. "And I'm here to make sure it's honored." Margaret's handkerchief was at her face now, tears spilling over. Mrs. Harrow looked away, her cheeks red. The room was a sea of lowered eyes and fidgeting hands. Eleanor didn't relish their discomfort. She wasn't here to shame them. She was here to wake them up. "I've written a letter," she continued, pulling the sealed envelope from her bag. "To all of you. It's not about anger or blame. It's about who I am, who I've always been. I'll read it when the time's right. But for now, know this, I'm still here. And I've got plans you haven't even dreamed of." She sat down, the silence deafening. Daniel tried to speak, but his words stumbled, lost in the weight of her presence. The meeting limped to a close, the agenda forgotten. As people filed out, some stopped to touch her shoulder, their apologies unspoken but clear. Margaret lingered, her eyes pleading, but Eleanor only nodded. There'd be time for words later. That night, Eleanor sat on her porch, the stars bright above her. She felt lighter, as if she'd shed a burden she hadn't known she carried. The town had seen her, truly seen her, for the first time in years. But her work wasn't done. The letter in her journal was a promise, not just to Willow Creek, but to herself. She'd read it at the right moment, when the town was ready to listen. Not just here. Over the next few days, Willow Creek shifted. People stopped by her farmhouse with small gifts, jam, flowers, handwritten notes. Daniel came too. His arrogance softened. His words halting but sincere. "I didn't mean to hurt you," he said, standing in her kitchen. I thought I was helping." Eleanor handed him a slice of pie. Her smile gentle. "Help me by seeing me, Daniel. That's all I ask." He nodded. And for the first time, she saw a glimpse of the boy she'd raised. The one who'd once believed in her strength. The letter waited. Its words a beacon for the next step. Eleanor knew the moment would come soon, a gathering. A celebration. A chance to speak her truth. Until then, she'd keep living. Keep loving. Keep smiling. They'd planned her funeral. But she was writing her own story. And it was far from over. Eleanor's days took on a new rhythm after the town hall meeting. Willow Creek buzzed with her name. Not in whispers of pity, but in tones of awe and curiosity. She'd shaken something loose in the town. A reminder that life didn't stop at 70. Her farmhouse became a beacon, drawing visitors who came not to mourn, but to connect. They brought stories, laughter, and questions, and Eleanor welcomed them all. Her journal always close by, a silent partner in her mission. She spent her mornings tending her roses, their vibrant reds and pinks a mirror of her own defiance. In the afternoons, she taught knitting at the community center, her hands steady as she guided teenagers through loops and stitches. The kids called her Miss Ellie, their eyes bright with admiration. One girl, Sarah, lingered after class, her voice shy. "Miss Ellie, are you really going to read that letter you talked about?" Eleanor smiled, tucking a stray thread into her skein. "When the time's right, Sarah. It's not just for mites, for all of us." The girl nodded, her curiosity a spark that warmed Eleanor's heart. The young saw her, truly saw her, and that was a victory in itself. Daniel's visits became more frequent, each one a step toward reconciliation. He'd sit at her kitchen table, sipping coffee and asking about her life, not her estate, but her stories. She told him about her childhood, about Thomas's laugh, about the time she'd saved a litter of kittens from a storm. He listened, really listened, and she saw the walls between them crumble, brick by brick. Margaret, too, began to change. She stopped by one evening with a basket of apples, her eyes free of pity for the first time in years. "I've been a fool, Ellie," she said, her voice thick. "I didn't see you." "Not really." Eleanor hugged her, the embrace a bridge over years of distance. They sat together, peeling apples and talking like they had as girls, their laughter filling the house. But the letter loomed, a promise unfulfilled. Eleanor knew the moment was Kamingatown Festival, set for the weekend, where Willow Creek would gather to celebrate summer's end. It was the perfect stage, a chance to speak her truth to everyone at once. She spent evenings refining the letter, her words a tapestry of memory and hope. It wasn't about shame or blame. It was about love, about the life she'd built and the legacy she'd choose. The festival arrived, the town square alive with music and light. Children darted through the crowd, their faces painted with stars and flowers. Tables groaned under pies and casseroles, and a band played old country tunes. Eleanor wore her emerald green blouse, her journal tucked into a woven bag. She moved through the crowd, her smile a quiet challenge, her presence a reminder that she was still here. Daniel found her near the bandstand, his expression nervous but warm. "Aunt Eleanor, can I help with anything?" he asked. She patted his arm, her eyes twinkling. "Just be here, Daniel. That's enough." He nodded, staying close, and she felt a surge of pride. He was learning, slowly but surely, As the evening deepened, the mayor called for a moment of reflection, a tradition where someone shared a story or a prayer. Eleanor stepped forward before anyone else could, her heart pounding but her voice steady. "I've got something to say," she said, climbing onto the bandstand. The crowd hushed, their eyes on her, some curious, some wary. She opened her journal, the letter crisp in her hands. "This is for Willow Creek," she began, her voice carrying over the square. "For all of you who've loved me, and maybe forgotten me a little too." She smiled, softening the sting of her words. "You planned my funeral, thought my time was up, but I'm still here, and I've got something to tell you." She read the letter, her words weaving a story of her life, not just the losses, but the joys, the way Thomas's hand felt in hers, the laughter of children she'd taught, the quiet beauty of a town that had shaped her. She spoke of love, of resilience, of the power of seeing each other, truly seeing, before it's too late. Her voice broke once, when she mentioned the cats she'd saved. But she carried on, her smile never fading. When she finished, the square was silent, then erupted in applause, not polite, but raw, heartfelt. Margaret was crying. Daniel's eyes were bright. And even Mrs. Harrow nodded, her face soft with respect. Eleanor stepped down, her heart full, her journal lighter in her hands. The festival continued, but something had shifted. People approached her, not with pity but with gratitude, their words a chorus of connection. She'd done more than read a letter, she'd rewritten her place in Willow Creek's story. As the night ended, Eleanor sat on a bench, watching the stars. The letter was done, but her work wasn't. She'd keep living, keep loving, keep showing them who she was. And she'd do it with a smile. The days following the festival felt like a new chapter for Eleanor. Willow Creek hadn't just heard her letter, they'd felt it. The town square, once a place of whispers, now echoed with her name in tones of respect and wonder. People stopped by her farmhouse with gifts, a quilt from the Historical Society, a jar of honey from Sarah's family, a handwritten apology from Mrs. Harrow. Eleanor accepted each one with grace, her smile a bridge between past hurts and future hopes. She spent her mornings writing in her journal. Not letters now, but plans. Plans for her land, her home, her legacy. The will she'd written years ago wasn't just a document, it was a vision. She'd always known her modest estate wasn't much in dollars, but it was rich in meaning. The farmhouse, with its creaking floors and rose garden, was a sanctuary. The land, rolling in green, was a promise of growth. She wanted it to live on, not as a prize for Daniel's ambitions, but as a gift to Willow Creek. She called a meeting with Daniel and Margaret, this time on her terms. They sat at her kitchen table, the air warm with the scent of fresh-baked bread. Eleanor slid her will across the table, its leather cover worn but proud. "This is my real will," she said, her voice calm but firm. "Not the one you thought you'd write for me." Daniel's hands hesitated before opening it, his eyes searching hers. Margaret leaned forward, her breath catching. Eleanor watched them read, their expressions shifting from curiosity to surprise. The will left the farmhouse to the town, to be turned into a community Centera place for knitting classes, book clubs, and stray cats. The land would become a garden, open to all, where children could plant seeds and learn the patience of growth. Her savings, modest but steady, would fund scholarships for Willow Creek's youth, like Sarah, who dreamed beyond the town's borders. "I don't want my life to be divided up," Eleanor said, breaking the silence. "I want it to grow, to keep giving. This is my legacy, not yours to decide." Daniel closed the will, his face unreadable but his hands gentle. "Aunt Eleanor," he said, "this is Beautiful. Margaret reached for her hand, tears in her eyes. You've always been the strong one. Ellie, I'm so sorry I forgot. Eleanor squeezed back, her heart full. They weren't perfect. Her family. But they were hers. And they were learning. Over the next week, Eleanor worked with the town council to set her plans in motion. She met with the mayor, a gruff man who'd always liked her pies, and outlined her vision for the community center. He listened, nodding, and by the end, he was smiling. Eleanor Grayson, he said, you're going to outlive us all. She laughed, the sound bright and free. The garden took shape faster than she'd expected. Volunteers, teenagers, neighbors. Even Daniel showed up with shovels and seeds. Sarah planted the first rows, her hands careful in the soil. This is for you, Miss Ellie, she said, and Eleanor's eyes stung with pride. The garden wasn't just dirt and flowers. It was a promise that her love for Willow Creek would endure. But Eleanor wasn't done living her own life. She joined the Historical Society, not to gossip, but to share stories of Willow Creek's past, her voice weaving history into hope. She baked pies for every festival, her kitchen a hub of warmth and laughter. And she kept knitting, her hands steady, her scarves wrapping the town in her care. One evening, as she sat on her porch, Daniel arrived with a bottle of wine and 2 glasses. Thought we could talk, he said, his smile shy. They sat together, the cicadas singing, and he told her about his dreams, not the city kind, but the ones he'd buried under ambition. I want to stay in Willow Creek, he said. Help with the garden. Maybe teach at the community center. Eleanor clinked her glass against his, her smile wide. You're welcome here, Daniel. Always have been. They talked until the stars came out, their bond stronger for the truth they'd faced. The will was notarized, the plans set. But Eleanor's heart was her true legacy. She'd shown Willow Creek that age was no end, that a life well lived could ripple outward, touching hearts long after the body slowed. She'd planned her comeback, and it was more than a smile, it was a gift that would outlast her. As autumn crept in, Eleanor began writing again. Not a letter this time, but a book. A collection of stories, hers, Thomas's, Willow Creek's. She wanted the town to remember, not just her, but the power of seeing each other. She wrote late into the night, her pen a beacon, her smile a promise. Autumn painted Willow Creek in shades of amber and crimson, the air sharp with the promise of change. Eleanor's farmhouse stood as a lighthouse, its windows glowing with warmth against the cooling nights. The community center was taking shape, its walls rising where her roses once bloomed alone. The garden thrived, a patchwork of color tended by hands young and old, a testament to her vision. Eleanor moved through it all with a quiet joy. Her journal, now a book in progress, its pages filled with the heartbeat of her town. She'd become more than a figurehead, she was a force, a reminder that life didn't fade with age. The Historical Society named her their honorary chair, and she shared stories of Willow Creek's founding, its triumphs, its quiet heroes. At the community center, she taught knitting and life lessons, her laughter mingling with the teenagers' banter. Sarah, her star pupil, had taken to calling her Grandma Ellie, a title that warmed her more than any fire. Daniel had stayed true to his word. He'd traded his city suits for jeans and work boots, his hands learning the rhythm of soil and seed. He helped build the community center, his hammer echoing alongside the volunteers. One afternoon, as they planted tulip bulbs, he looked at Eleanor and said, "I'm proud of you, Aunt Eleanor, and I'm proud to be here." She ruffled his hair, a gesture from his childhood, and they laughed, the sound a bridge across years of misunderstanding. Margaret, too, had found her place. She joined Eleanor in the garden. Her hand steadier now, her heart lighter. They talked of their childhood, of their parents, of the love that had always bound them, even through mistakes. "You've changed us, Ellie," Margaret said one evening, her voice soft. "You've changed me." Eleanor hugged her, their bond a quiet victory. The book grew, page by page, a tapestry of stories that captured Willow Creek's soul. Eleanor wrote of Thomas's kindness, of the stray cats she'd saved, of the children who'd grown under her care. She wrote of the funeral they'd planned, not with bitterness, but with humor and grace. A reminder that life could surprise even the most certain plans. The townsfolk began to contribute, slipping her notes with their own stories, their own truths. It was becoming their book, not just hers. One crisp October morning, the community center opened. The town gathered, the air alive with music and chatter. The mayor unveiled a plaque, Eleanor Grayson Community Center, a place for all. Eleanor stood beside it, her emerald green blouse bright against the autumn leaves, her smile wide and unyielding. She didn't speak long, just thanked the town, her voice steady, her eyes bright. Afterward, Sarah pulled her aside, holding a small notebook. "I wrote something for you, Grandma Ellie," she said, her cheeks pink. It was a poem, simple but raw, about a woman who refused to fade, who turned whispers into songs. Eleanor's eyes misted as she read it, her heart full. "You're my legacy too, Sarah," she said, hugging the girl close. As winter approached, Eleanor's health began to falter, not dramatically, but enough to slow her steps. She didn't fear it. She'd lived too fully to dread the inevitable. She spent her days writing, teaching, loving. The book was nearly done, its final pages a letter to the future, a call to see the living, to cherish the present. One evening, as snow dusted the garden, Eleanor sat on her porch, her journal in her lap. Daniel joined her, a blanket over his shoulders. "You've changed everything, Aunt Eleanor," he said. "This town, me, everything." She smiled, her eyes on the stars. "I just reminded you what was already there, Daniel. The rest is up to you." She handed him the journal. "It's way to promise. Finish it for me, if I can't." He nodded, his eyes solemn but warm. "I will." Eleanor didn't know how many days she had left, but she didn't count them. She'd shown up to her own funeral, not with anger, but with a will and a smile. She'd rewritten her story, and Willow Creek's too. As she rocked in her chair, the creek a steady rhythm, she felt peace. Her legacy wasn't in the land or the center, it was in the hearts she'd touched, the lives she'd awakened. And so, Eleanor Grayson lived on, her smile a light that no one could dim, her story a song that Willow Creek would sing for years to come.